8 here on Kiwi. Time to talk to the voice of the creative economy. Vincent Heeringa it is from Idealog magazine, idealog.co.nz. Good morning, Vincent.
Good morning, Wammo.
And today we're talking about the growth of renewables, not only, I suppose, here in New Zealand, but around the world.
Around the world, and just as the renewable sector is really starting to get ahead of steam, we also are slowing down in this country the amount of investment and conversion into this kind of green economy. I don't know whether you noticed this morning, but the Minister, Tim Grosser, has confirmed that farmers are going to get a reprieve and not be dragged into the emissions trading scheme as soon as was planned under the Labour government. That really they're not going to be involved in the ETS until 2015 now.
So that makes it a lot harder, of course, for New Zealand to reach its targets.
Absolutely. I mean, the analogy is that we are a car racing along the motorway and we have to put the brakes on to reach our Kyoto and other international agreements. But the later we leave it, the harder the brakes have to go on before we smash into that wall.
Yeah, and at the moment the onus being put back on to the average New Zealander, the consumer.
Well, that's how it's actually going to end up working. I mean, ultimately, I suppose you could argue that we will be paying for our carbon pricing through the pricing of products and services, but particularly in the farming sector, that is also distributed through through their export products as well. So, yes, that's right. The taxpayer, the government, will be footing the ETS bill as a tax, really.
Okay.
On us all.
So, getting back to renewables, what is the trend worldwide? Is there some new research?
There's a new report just published that tracks the investment in renewables, and there was a downturn in 2008, 2009, as you kind of would expect with the GFC and the lack of money around for investing in anything very much, especially in new pioneering energy. But that's rebounded quite strongly in 2010 and is set. Renewables are set to take up to about a quarter of the world's energy production this year, which is the largest ever, and shows an incredible growth of somewhere up to about 50% annually across the world. And in particular, the growth is in solar, wind, and biofuels, with China leading the charge.
We're seeing a big growth, as you say, in solar, aren't we? The cost of solar panels has been coming down.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the cost of solar panels is following that same Moore's law of kind of silicon chips and devices. That the more the market buys solar panels, the more investment goes in, the faster they are getting smaller, lighter, and cheaper. And so you're not surprised that solar is growing massively. Something like 72% growth in electric solar PV generators in the last 5 years internationally, and solar connected to the grid. So that's solar PV sort of independent of a grid, and then solar connected to a grid is growing at almost 90% a year.
And also large-scale solar projects, not just small-scale on buildings and personal homes, but actual solar generating plants.
Well, that's where the investment seems to be. I mean, it's kind of interesting looking at who's putting the money into these things, and they tend to be either government-funded banks or things like Asia Pacific Bank, the large, I suppose, trade banks, that are looking at growth and development, particularly in the developing world. And interestingly, investing in large infrastructure that can put electricity back into a grid rather than to individual homes. So this sort of decentralised idea of electricity being generated in your own home for your own purposes doesn't seem to be taking off. The grid still seems to be getting the energy, to use the pun.
So this growth of renewables, is it replacing fossil fuels, or is it the fact that the need for energy just keeps on growing around the world, so the move is into renewables as opposed to replacing what has been?
Yeah, I think it's very much what you just said, that the growth in fossil fuel consumption continues, and that the demand for energy is such that fossil fuels and renewables will be required, and so the growth is not coming because of so much a need to shift, but it's a need to supply energy to these incredibly fast-growing economies, particularly in the developing world, and particularly China, which kind of makes sense, if you think about the vulnerability that China has towards oil and gas. They are rapidly becoming the biggest investors. Well, they are the biggest investors, but they also are leading the charge in the science of renewables as well.
And you've got to wonder where we would be at if there wasn't this economic crisis that's been going on since 2008 as well, where it slowed world growth. But
similarly, you wonder where it might have been if the level of investment in technology had continued as well. So it's, at the same time as slowing down economic growth and energy consumption, it also slowed down investment in pioneering research and innovation. So it's kind of, the GFC had, I think, there were two sides to that story.
Interesting stuff. Vincent Heeringa is from Ideologue magazine, ideologue.co.nz. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Wammo.